So it should be going.
We good?
Brilliant. I think we're live on Facebook, Stan.
Yeah.
Not bad going. This Zoom malarkey is really bugging me. Doesn't work half the time, does it?
Well, we're here.
I think I might have broken it.
Well, we're here now.
Yeah, we're here finally.
Yeah. I suppose
Good.
that's
So
what
for those
technology is all about. Yeah. It's a technical these technical processes.
technical, it was 5 minutes. Now it's 35 minutes to get set up. Doesn't seem to matter how much I try. Anyway, so for those of you that have finally just joined us, I'm Stephen Mackinday from Perfect Balance Clinic, and this is the fabulous Stan Mediri. So Stan and I work together at the clinic working with high performance athletes, but Stan more so than me. I normally put them back together, and Stan gets them back on the track, running very fast, and also Stan running very far.
Indeed, which is our subject tonight, which is endurance.
Yeah.
And
so tonight we're going to be talking about endurance, and we're going to hopefully leave you with 3 top tips from Stan Mediri, our Olympic level elite performance coach. So Stan, endurance.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, it is a biomotor ability, necessary for performance. Just hang on, Steve. I think I'm getting flickered here. I'm not sure if I'm coming through there.
I know it's fine at this end.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you can. But anyway, yeah, endurance is one of the performance biomotor abilities. Along with the speed, along with the strength, along with all the other sub components that come with and that come with those biomotor abilities. Endurance is one of, if I would put it this way, endurance is one of the 3 cornerstone biomotor abilities for performance in any sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how important it is. And irregardless of what sport is, not necessarily just the sporting activities that are rated endurance. Any sport would need a base of endurance training. But what is it? What exactly is endurance in itself? It comes in 2 forms. You've got general endurance, which is, what everyone else does, just to keep some degree of welfare fitness, and that is general endurance. And for top level athletes, they would do general endurance preparation as a stepping stone to very specific endurance later on, during the course of the season. So endurance has got 2 parts to it. There's the general endurance and there is specific endurance. Now, specific endurance is so called because it is the type of endurance that is pertinent to a particular sport. And each sport would have different shades of endurance, that are necessary, for someone to excel in them. Why? Because they are based on the skill and the technique that is relevant in that sport. So for somebody to really thrive in a particular sport, they would need to have specific endurance for that sport. So runners, as an example, depending on what event they are doing, we're talking about maybe starting from the event of 800 meters and above, up to the marathon, up to the ultra marathon. So endurance will have to take the shape and the shade of each one of those particular event. Yeah. Having endurance in one activity does not necessarily make you fit enough for another activity, because that will be the type of endurance will be different. So that's what endurance is about, Steve.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So there's obviously there's been a huge increase in the amount of endurance races, haven't there, and type events. So they seem to have increased a lot in popularity over the last decade or so with like ultra marathons and like Olympic distance triathlons. So they seem to be on the up and up and up. So it's definitely an area that we're seeing a lot more in clinics. So it's useful to have the background of what goes through the elite performer's mind when it comes to endurance training.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It
So
is, yeah.
what exactly is endurance from your point of view, Stan? So from our point of view, we talk a lot about VO2 max and muscular endurance and like physical endurance, mental endurance, and they're all big components of that elite performer's armory. But from an elite coach's point of view, what are you talking about when you talk about endurance?
I think there are three things that you were talking about in from a performance standpoint. Which the first one, which is because it's endurance, you probably are talking. We're now talking about energy systems here, and predominantly we are talking about the aerobic energy system.
Yeah,
this is about the fitness in that an athlete or a person requires, to invest in their oxygen uptake during an activity. So this has to do with their cardiovascular, their respiratory, faculties, bringing them up to speed or bringing them up to an adaptation necessary for them to carry out the activities that they want to do. So that would be the first component of endurance. The second one would be, in an event where there is running, then it is the running speed, the optimal running speed necessary for that particular event.
Yeah.
Yes. So the optimal speed for 800 meters would naturally be different from the optimal speed for a marathon runner. So that brings in a very specific type of speed that is relevant for that particular event. And with that, it brings in very specific neuromechanics that are necessary for that optimal type of speed that the athlete requires or the sports person requires for their sport in the discipline. The third component there would be, now this is the big one with endurance. It is the energy expenditure. Because of the nature of most endurance events, it is prudent, and the only advantage any athlete can have is if they have a running economy, if they are economical in their efforts, if they are economical in their deliberations of whatever nature that is important for their sport. That is how they will be able to accomplish greater outputs in that discipline, in that sport. So one, it's oxygen uptake. Second, it's the mechanics of that sport, which is the running speed, the optimal speed for it. And thirdly, from an endurance point of view, it is the running economy. How economical can someone get, or can they bring on board so that they last the duration? Because by its very nature, endurance is about duration. It's usually about duration, yes. So for the body to last that duration, there must be something that we must perform within the processes of activity for the body to last that long. And that must zero in on economy of effort, economy of running. Something you touched on there, Steve, earlier on is, in as much as these three here, they sit within the physiology of the body, so to speak. There is an important subculture to it, which is a social one, if you like, which is something to do with one's own desire and ability, to endure. Now,
so motivation.
Yeah, exactly. It's motivation, all right, but it's also that ability to, when push comes to shove, when someone has got to dig in, if you like, you want to go into the trenches when you are in the face of fatigue. Fatigue is there's an onslaught of fatigue in whatever you are doing. You want to go dig in and face up to that. And sometimes that takes more than just motivation. It invites mental skills, emotional skills that one needs for them to, to dig in and face up to what, to the demands of their challenge. So that for me is what endurance really, those are the pillars of what endurance is. Absolutely.
So it's obviously with the rise of sports, endurance related sports, there's an increased importance to be able to develop it and maintain it at a certain level. So in terms of the maintenance of endurance, how do people in your eyes go about maintaining endurance once they've got to a certain level? Is it just through running? Can they cross train? Do they need to train very specifically for that sport? Like you mentioned earlier that there's specific types of endurance. Do they need to train specifically for that? I know we're going to talk about elements that people forget when it comes to endurance, like maintaining muscle mass and strength. But how does one maintain endurance?
Yeah, well, as in most, in most, if not all biomotor abilities, that is something that has to be invested in on a progressive note. The body will adapt in as much as it receives progressive overload. So the duration of training and the content of training, the training load would need in itself to have some incremental culture that one is employing within their training regime for them just to maintain where there is. Because once they drop off with that, the body by nature will simply start getting down. As long as the training load, the training stimuli is reduced, the body's response is also reduced. So they start tailing off in their endurance. So it's to maintain it, it's about maintaining the stimuli. But how do they do that? Obviously, to avoid the other side of it, which is overuse injuries, there's need for variety. It's the lack of variety. It's really a very tricky, it's a very tricky situation to find the balance, because you want to maintain endurance and yet you do not want to make yourself susceptible to overuse injuries. Therefore, what you want to bring in the scenario there is variety on what other activities you can do that can continue to create the same stimuli, or rather even an increase the stimuli on your training load, so that the body continues to progress forward. This is where the variability of training comes in. And it is a difficult area for most endurance runners because they just want to run. Yeah, and running is what they enjoy doing. And yet sometimes there's need then to find, how else can I maintain cardiovascular fitness? How else can I maintain muscular endurance? How else can I maintain, mental and emotional endurance? Find other activities around that feed into those components of performance to maintain it, so that the body gets a break, from time to time, and yet it still acquires those elements that are important for endurance.
Do you find that there's particular things that if people, I know we've talked a lot about injuries and training. Obviously there's a higher injury risk with regards to endurance from overuse injuries, not so much traumatic injuries, but overuse injuries. Yeah. So if an athlete gets injured that's endurance based, to maintain their endurance, are there things that you would suggest to help someone who wanted to maintain their endurance but not put load through their joints? I know what I'd suggest, but what would you suggest?
Yeah, it's change of training. It's the environment, really. It's the medium in which the training is taking place. So if you change the medium in which the training normally or usually takes place, you are generally just putting in a variability to your training, and therefore reducing those stresses that are going through the joints and that are going through the body. Sometimes it's just changing that running surface. If you're a road runner, you might want to change. It's not every time that you want to run on the roads. It's not every time that you want to run on the track. It's not every time that you want to run on the very medium that you compete on. So it's finding different mediums to do that. It's finding what else can I do for cardiovascular, and respiratory activities. You might want to cross-train with swimming, for instance. The body wouldn't know whether the stressor is aquatic or the stressor is on the ground. All it just records is the stressor. So finding different mediums to do that is really what the trick would be, Yeah. And so that's what one would recommend. Yes.
So one thing that we look at in terms of the physical therapy is something called an AlterG. So it's a zero gravity treadmill. So it helps to support the athlete whilst they're running. So it's not great in terms of adaptive load or adaptive stress on the body in terms of physical stress, but from a cardiovascular point of view, it's got a similar stress on the body with regards to the load. So the cardiovascular load. So it's definitely something to consider if you're an endurance athlete and need to keep up training for long distances and for long periods of time whilst recovering from injury. The AlterG is a good stopgap until you get back running again. But Stan, are there particular considerations when it comes to training and endurance? What would you say the key things are for people to look out for? If they're a beginner, they want to improve their endurance, or if they're an elite and they want to improve their endurance from where they are there, what different training regimes would you advise to people?
Yeah, I think my advice, for beginners is patience. There's need for patience because the temptation, if I love endurance, is to go out for a long run, and come back knackered and almost hate myself for doing that, and maybe struggle to get back up there. So I need to be patient and break the distances into manageable portions and increase those distances, with time, and not trying to take them all at the same time. But more importantly, I would suggest for beginners and even medium and top athletes is start looking at your running technique. There's nothing that hurts an endurance runner more than the running technique, because of the amount of repetition that is involved in endurance running. It's easy for somebody with, in a shorter distances like 200, 400 meters, you only have that much 400 meters or 200 meters to get by with a wrong technique, and then it's done. Albeit, yes, you're using lots of intensity. But come to long distances, if the technique is poor, guess what you are doing? You are repeating this over that whole distance.
Yeah.
Over that whole distance. And, if the muscles that are fighting against each other, they are going to be fighting against each other for that whole 5K, 10K, or whatever it is that you're doing. And that cannot be right for the body. And the body would tell you soon enough that it is not really grateful for what you are making it go through. So focus on your technique, run well and break it down into small portions so that it's manageable. There is one big challenge that endurance runners face. It's called fatigue. When fatigue sets in, when fatigue pays you a visit, your technique, it doesn't matter who you are, you start struggling with your technique. And therefore, sometimes probably this is where you want to go cut your distances so that you are pushing your fatigue threshold gradually over the season and not go into it gung-ho. So basically what I'm saying is you are staying in your fatigue threshold for a little while whilst you are still able to contain or maintain your running form before everything else collapses. That's what you want to do, and get back in and then attack the next distance, attack the next portion, of that distance. So patience and the progressive planning is something that I would encourage you that. Working with middle and long distance runners and marathon runners, you find that that's something that I've found that they need to just take a step back and break down and focus on their technique. If anything, that then invest into their running economy. That's what my greatest advice would be.
Yeah. So Stan, I'm not sure if you remember him. There was a chap that we worked on both together. He was an ultra marathon runner. Do you remember him?
Yeah,
Probably
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah,
4 or 5 years ago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Tall guy, tall guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
I think the only thing we did with him was to get him in the gym, and we'll focus on his strength, didn't we? So focus on his glutes and hamstrings and just improving that. And he was like taking 5 minutes off his PB straight, wasn't he?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Because what he was doing, bless him, I'm trying to think of his name, is because of his height, he really had problems supporting his trunk, which is something that happens with long distance runners. The trunk just tends to collapse up on the front. Well, not collapse, but there's a tendency to overlean onto the front as the hips drop down. And getting him back into the gym to work on his strength so that the structure, there's integrity in his structure so that his long legs were able, to oscillate freely and allow economy of effort. That's all that we did with him. And yes, the PBs just came tumbling down, not because he started running faster in any way, but because we just removed those barriers and made the structure more robust. So there is more economy of effort in his endeavors.
yeah. No, it's brilliant. Really good.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me nicely on to my next question. But how important do you think focusing on strength and speed are for endurance athletes?
Yeah, it very, very important. Strength is very important. Why? Because the one activity that an endurance runner is using, an endurance athlete, is muscle endurance. Now, muscle is only available to endure. Muscle is only available to endure if there's enough muscle, if there's enough strength in the muscle. Otherwise, if there's not enough of that, then the depletion point is very close in that distance, within that race or within that training zone, within that training session, rather. So it's important for an athlete to build their strength, regardless of whatever the event is. Now, strength is different. We're not talking absolute strength. We're not talking the strength of muscle mass increased, hypertrophy of the sort that probably a sprinter needs or a power lifter needs. No, we're talking about strength that is relevant for their muscles there to be able to have a base to provide repeated contractions, both concentric and eccentric contractions. And because of the varied terrain that an endurance runner goes through, both contractions are tested anyway. And so there must be a resource there of strength to be able to meet those challenges that an athlete will go through in different terrain over the distance that they are running. So strength is important. And I know distance runners really is not something that they have a lot of time for. They believe in getting stronger by running. True, there's a bit of strength that comes with that, but not the amount of strength that you probably can get without the wear and tear, without the loading on the joints. Something that you can go into the gym and get it done for the right muscle groups, for the muscle groups that are necessary for the race itself. So with a proper plan and a proper guidance, strength training is critical, really, for a middle and long distance runner. The next thing that they would need there also is speed. If you're going to complete the distance that you have chosen, 5, 10, 30, anyone can complete that. Given if you have indefinite time, anyone could complete any distance. Well, a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week. But unfortunately, events are organized in certain duration. So we have to complete them in a certain specific time or a specific range of time. And to do that, then I need to invest in speed. Speed has got to be invested in. I know long distance runners tend to think it is something that just comes along the way. No, speed is a completely different animal. it's something that one needs to invest in and learn the skill of speed. Just like you learn the skill of endurance, the skill of strength, there is need to learn the skill of speed. Learn all the tenets of speed, the mechanics of it, and there would be individual differences, variations, that each one person has got it depending, somebody has got long legs, I've got short legs, depending musculature. So all those things need to be put into the pot, to flush out and come up with what is appropriate for each individual. So those would be the three that I would ask people to, to get involved in and supplement their road running or their long race, their long runs or short runs.
Stan, I was just thinking it might be good next time to have to show people a couple of the drills that they could use for improving some of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I've found that with most runners, long distance runners, drills, it's not something that they have a lot of time for again, because, we'll just warm up on the track. We'll just warm up as we run, as it were, sort of thing. And yet it's something that you want to find time for during the warm up, or something that you want to find time for maybe on a different training day when you're not going out for your long runs or short runs. You're just working on your drills, which invest into your movement patterns that are necessary for your event. That's what drills are for. They are repetitions. They are repetitions of movement pathways that we are bringing back into the nervous system and into the muscles and storing them there like codes, so the muscles can remember that during a race or during a training session.
Yeah. That sounds good. So, Stan, so endurance is a very interesting subject, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of people at home probably wondering how do they improve their endurance? What would you say the top 3 tips are to help them improve their endurance?
Yeah, the first one there is work on your cardiovascular fitness. So find an activity where you are working on your heart, your lungs, and all those systems, whether it is the walk, whether it is the swimming, whether it is whatever it is that's working your cardiovascular fitness level, because that's important. Why is it important? It's the one that supplies the blood into the muscles for the long duration of activity. So cardiovascular fitness, critical there. The next one then is your running technique. Running technique needs to be sorted because it feeds into your running economy, which is the third point. Build up your cardiovascular fitness, work on your speed, work on your technique, and work on your running economy. Those are the 3 things that I would encourage endurance runners to focus on.
That's fantastic. It's good. And Stan, if people find that difficult to work on themselves, you've got some sessions running online, haven't you, to help people work on their technique and endurance so they can be able to run further. But how do people get access to those sessions?
Yeah, they get on the access to them by going to the Perfect Balance Clinic website and sign up to online classes. There's one on a Friday afternoon at 4:30, and then there's one on Saturday at 2:30. And those are the 2 that are running currently. So get onto the Perfect Balance Clinic website, go to classes, classes online and register, put your name down there, and follow-up communication will be sent your way to get you into those classes. And
Brilliant, fantastic, good. So if you're at home and you're wondering how to improve your endurance and you missed the start of this, well, you can rewind it. So that's the easy bit. So you just rewind it. If you have any questions or you'd like more information about how to improve your endurance, then you can always get hold of either Stan or myself through Perfect Balance Clinic. and you can just pop the details, your details, in the box below, and we'd be more happy to get back to you with the answers to any of your burning questions around how to improve your running, and in particular, how to run further and improve your endurance. But that's been great talking to you tonight. Thanks very much to have you, Stan. And we're back. We're back again on Wednesday, aren't we, I believe?
Yes, we're back on Wednesday, and we're looking at the subject matter, the all-important subject matter of speed.
Speed, it's the big one. It's the big one. Usain Bolt's going to be making an appearance. Excellent. Good. Stan, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Great talking to you, mate.
You have a great one, man. You have a super duper one too.
Excellent. Fantastic. And don't forget, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments box below, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible over the weekend or in evenings as well, and we'll be able to answer your questions, be able to get you back on track and get you running faster and further than you ever have done before. But for now, it's bye-bye from me.
Indeed, bye-bye from me too.
We'll see you later. Take care, guys. Bye.